Hello all, and a very warm welcome once again. I couldn't find this essay in my any former videos. It might still be there, but I thought I'd go through this in case I hadn't actually covered it, because I think it's very important. And that is that even with, and we're going to go back to the Titus Jesus connection now, that even without Joseph Atwell's fairly clear sequential pattern within the stories of both Jesus and Titus's ministry or war in Josephus's War of the Jews, we find some really interesting parallels, and they serve to show that really we can take odds, prior odds in any kind of Bayesian analysis, and help them initially, the prior probabilities. We can actually have them reasonably high. Now, I have been really careful here, and I want to show that I'm basically building a conservative estimate there for the priors, right? So these are going to be the numbers that we first use, this percentage number, say 0.1 or 0.5, so that we can begin to stack these parallels. And remember, they are in order and they contain specific points there of comparison, so that we can show that I'm not trying to be over biased for this hypothesis. And so I'm going to go through that today. I couldn't find it, and I think I might have put this away here and not actually covered it. So I wanted to go through this. And remember, people, that this is probably going to be the last few days here of me making these kinds of videos. I will refer back to them, I'm sure, of course. But I wanted to thoroughly engage with the information we find in the Gospels and the just early Christianity there in the first, say, two really centuries, and show that the historical version of this Jesus story is mythology. It is not historical. There is very little of an historical kernel there, if at all. There are different Jesuses that existed at the time. Some of them were rebels, some of them were kind of mystics, and so on. And they had disputes. One or two had disputes with Rome, like Jesus ben Gamala, Yeshua Notsri, and someone talking about the 70s BC now. So we can see how it definitely looks like these Jesuses might well have, some aspects of their stories might well have been used to bolster or used in some way to create the Jesus story. And remember, Nazarene and Notsri and Nazareth, I think, have been conflated, as many people do. But I just want to go through this so we can see that even without those parallels, this story fits. That Titus is basically used as a type for Jesus in the gospel narratives, after, of course, this mythic celestial logos, the Jesus that's felt within, is already referred to and talked about, and he's being pulled out of the Old Testament in kind of coded references. So here is the Bayesian analysis of Flavian influence on the historicization of Christianity. Okay, summary hypothesis. This is hypothesis 1 here. Christianity began as a mystical or celestial belief system about a non-earthly Christ figure, which was later historicized under the influence of the Flavian dynasty as a tool of pacification and social control following the Jewish War, 66 to 70 CE. Okay, remember, the gospel stories come decades later. This thesis gains additional strength when we clearly delineate the likelihood that the earliest form of Christianity was Gnostic or celestial in nature. Okay, many of my videos, I hopefully attest to this, recognize the political benefits to Rome in reshaping this movement into a historicized pacifist religion or pacifistic religion. Account for the flexible gap of several decades between the reign of Titus, 79 to 81 CE, and the emergence of the canonical Gospels, circa 90 to 120 CE, maybe later, which allows for a plausible editorial and propagandistic transformation process. Competing hypothesis here. So this is the null hypothesis, the other opposite hypothesis. Christianity began as a historical religion centered around an earthly Jesus during the early 1st century, independent of Flavian influence. And hypothesis 3, Christianity was invented entirely by the Flavians as imperial propaganda with no prior mystical or celestial roots, right? And I don't believe this, and this would, I don't think is actually Joseph Atwell's hypothesis anymore. He's one of the people that really first built this hypothesis of the Flavian influence on Christianity. I am with hypothesis 1 here. Okay. Note on compatibility of H1 and H3. Okay. While H1 and H3 are treated as distinct hypotheses in the Bayesian model for clarity and qualification, they are in fact complementary and mutually reinforcing. Okay, H1 describes the origin of Christianity as a celestial cult, while H3 describes the later transformation or public invention of its historical narrative by Flavian interest. Sorry, have I got them? Yeah. Okay. The most plausible synthesis is a two-phase model, a mystical Christ movement co-opted now and redefined under Flavian propaganda strategies. Okay. So here, moving on, evidence, categories, and likelihood. Okay, so first of all, we have Pauline silence and celestial Christology. Paul never mentions Bethlehem, Nazareth, Pilate, parables, or miracles. Christ is revealed through scripture and vision, as per Galatians 1, 11, 12, 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8, and Hebrews 8, 4. No clear earthly chronology or named historical witnesses. Okay, not in Paul, not really. They are seen in vision. The pillars are very meekly referenced and very quickly, and they could easily be references here to people who had the same experiences as Paul. So it supports H1 strongly here, 0.95, so 95%. Supports H2 very weakly, 0.2%, and supports, this is not percentages, well it is percentages, but we're looking at the spread of the probability here. Weakly, 0.2%, supports H3, moderate, say 0.6%. So 2, the silence in contemporary records and sources. No reference to Jesus or Christians in Philo, Seneca, Pliny the Elder, or other first century writers. And I've done a video on this, and there are many, 15, 20 different people who were living at the time who don't reference Jesus. And some of them from Galilee and from Judea, and some of them, of course, from around the empire. They don't know him. Okay, H1, hypothesis 1 here, 0.85, hypothesis 2, this is going to be, I'll just say 0.3, hypothesis 3, 0.6. Okay, so again, a weak hypothesis on historicity. So 3, absence of first century persecution per Candida Moss. Brilliant book, The Myth of Persecution. No concrete evidence of widespread martyrdoms under Nero or Domitian. Martyrdom stories begin to appear in the late 2nd century, and of course the mention of Christians, the very mention of Jesus or Christians, is basically absent in the 1st century. That is astonishing if this stuff all happened. Hypothesis 0.8 for 1, H2 is 0.3, H3 is 0.8. Okay, so Roman, pro-Roman themes in the Gospels. Pilate exonerated centurions are noble. Jesus tells followers to pay taxes. Remember, a complete turnaround, a complete 180 from the Messianic Jewish leaders that hated Rome and went to war with them. Okay, hypothesis 1 now, 0.85. Hypothesis 2, 0.3. Hypothesis 3 here, 0.9. So you see how this is all coming together, and there are many, another 5 of these. Josephus, as Flavian propagandist, wrote under Flavian patronage. Titus Flavius Josephus inserts suspicious references to Jesus and James. Antiquity shows alignment with gospel tone. Now, of course, I believe, as many do, that Josephus never mentioned Jesus Christ. He mentions other Jesuses that appear to be like Jesus, but not Jesus. Again, 0.85 for hypothesis 1, 0.5 for H2, 0.9 for H3. So always we're seeing the marker here is pushed towards hypothesis 1 and 3, and never to the historicity. Constantine and the Flavians and the spello inscription. Constantine honoured the Flavian gens or generations as ancestors, ordered the construction of a temple to the Flavian family, imitated Flavian imperial propaganda, put his arch right between two of the biggest works projects of the Flavians, the Colosseum and of course the Forum, massively helped along and built up by them. Okay, H1.7, H2.5, H3.85. Okay, Flavian proximity network. Flavia Domitilla, niece of Vespasian, connected to Christian tradition. Titus Flavius Clemens, executed for atheism, possibly Christianity here, or an early form of it, not yet called Christianity. Clement of Rome, possibly from the Flavian court. Epaphroditus, Flavian freedman, connected to both Josephus and Christian texts. Of course, Paul talks about this, and they're both executed under Domitian, and they both executed, I think, in Christian texts, I think Paul. H1.9, H2.2, H3.85. Nereus and Achilles, martyrs from Domitilla's household. Their legend situates them within the Flavian court life, honoured in early Christian sources, in early Roman Christian sources. Again, 2 names, not particularly common, I think. Again, tied to the Flavian family and acknowledged so by church fathers. H1.9, H2.2, H3.85. The timeline fit, number 10, the last one. Okay. Pauline letters predate the Flavians, 40s to 60s CE. That's if you take the consensus view at the moment. Supports H1. Historicist narratives, Gospels and Josephus appear after 70 CE. All of them. Flavian reign 69 to 96 CE corresponds with the shift from celestial to historical narrative, and they do so very neatly. A 20 to 40 year window between Titus and finalized gospel forms is consistent with a propagandistic transition period. H1, 0.95, H2, 0.4. Okay, a little higher now, about the highest, I think. H3, 0.6. So the Baysian calculation simplified, and we won't go through all the zeros and ones. The probability values used here are deliberately conservative and grounded in available textual, historical and contextual data, while Bayesian historical models always involve some degree of speculation and subjectivity. The assigned likelihood fall within reasonable scholarly bounds. Very important to stress this. They are proportionate to the strength of evidence in each category and reflect caution rather than overconfidence. Such inputs are logically defensible and widely used in historical probabilistic reasoning, especially where direct empirical data is unavailable, as in this case. So to normalize this now, H1 is 66% likely to be true. Okay, so remember that this is the celestial Jesus, and then he's reinterpreted later on in Rome or around Rome, within the empire, into Greek, the lingua franca, and he takes on a lot of these mythic forms of pagan deities and so on. Titus even appears there, Vespasian healing the withered hand and healing the blind man, like that, right? So point two, hypothesis 2, 0.04% likely to be the actual historical valid approach here to understanding this, the true approach here. So 0.04 for historicity. H3. And again, I don't really subscribe to this. It's not very likely that Titus comes along and just creates everything, because we do have pre-Titus texts, it looks like, and they are certainly in favor of a celestial Jesus, right? So this is 34% likely to be true. And so these numbers don't necessarily have to be completely on point, right, to show people that this is what we're dealing with here. And the model is further strengthened by recognizing the mere act of co-opting an existing mythical movement, rather than inventing it from scratch, makes the hypothesis more historically plausible. It avoids speculative extremes while explaining both the origin and political transformation of early Christianity. Given that the founders of official Christianity, like Constantine, explicitly honored the Flavian dynasty, and that numerous early Christian figures, Domitilla, Clemens, Nereus, Achilles, appear within or adjacent to the Flavian orbit, the alignment between early Christian development and Flavian imperial interest is too consistent to ignore. And of course, I left out the fact that the earliest Christian symbols are Flavian symbols as well. They appear on coins minted by Titus Flavius, the son. Okay, the cumulative evidence suggests that the most probable scenario is a combination of H1, H3. Christianity began as a celestial sect with no historical Jesus and was subsequently historicized under Flavian influence or for political purposes. The hypothesis that Jesus was a real historical figure with no Roman influence, H2, has virtually no support from the early textual and archaeological record. H3, the idea that the Flavians completely invented Christianity, gains strength when treated not as a standalone, but as a second phase in a two-stage process following the celestial origin of Christianity in hypothesis 1. This Bayesian synthesis reinforced by the timeline, political motives, and the close presence of Flavian-linked individuals in early Christian memory strongly favors Flavian co-option and transformation of a mystical sect into a historical narrative. And remember, we did not use the 31-32 sequential parallels that Joseph Atwell found, and also the other 4 or so that show the tight linkage here in other aspects of the fall of Jerusalem. The Mary incident with her son, eating her son and offering it as a Passover lamb. 2 individuals, John and Simon, who were caught. Simon condemned. John obviously survives but is in prison for the rest of his life. These and other things are reasons to seriously put this notion here, this hypothesis forward for a reinterpretation of Christianity. We now have strong evidence for this. new and revised hypothesis, and I think people should begin to take it seriously. Now, this is the best, most powerful explanation for the beginning of Christianity, the second stage, I should say, of Christianity, and the advent of the gospel stories. Thank you, and peace out.